catering issue, so food might be coming in throughout. You're welcome to grab it throughout the conversation or when we finish up tonight. So my name is Katie. I am the communications coordinator at the Burgess Institute. We are joined here tonight with Seth Killian. He is the founder and CEO of Lingco. So welcome, Seth. We're excited to have you back on campus. Do you want to just get started by telling us a little bit about yourself, maybe your journey here at MSU?
Yeah, of course. So I was born and raised in Jackson, so just about an hour from here. I went to a boarding school in Indiana, and I didn't really know that I wanted to go to Michigan State at first. It was just kind of a down the road, so it makes sense. And when I first got to Michigan State, I wasn't sure what I wanted to major in, so I just showed up to AOP. I Googled the top 10 paying majors, and the first two weren't available. The third one was petroleum engineering, and that didn't seem like it was going to work. And fourth was computer science. So I majored in computer science and ended up studying abroad, which is what led to Lingco, and ended up here. So Michigan born and raised, and probably a very similar background to many of you here today.
Awesome, yeah. So obviously you came to MSU not really knowing you wanted to be an entrepreneur. So what was that journey like, kind of figuring out that's the path you wanted to take?
So for my first year, I thought I was going to be in the Air Force, actually. And so I was in Air Force ROTC and majoring in computer science, and entrepreneurship was never really on my radar. It wasn't until actually in my junior year that I discovered that the Hatch existed, that MSU even had an entrepreneurship program. Because in the College of Engineering, we didn't really learn about entrepreneurship. And so it wasn't until I met another student on campus who was working on a venture, and he told me about this place called the Hatch. And I had already been thinking about Lingco as a startup idea, but I didn't have any support. And so it was going to the Hatch, and they had the startup weekend there, and that's how I was able to really learn all about entrepreneurship and all those opportunities.
Awesome, yeah. Thank you for sharing. So what are some of those skills that really helped you build Lingco that maybe you found within the Burgess Institute and those resources?
I think that the Burgess Institute was really helpful in terms of the mentors and the structured programming. So I'd never heard of a pitch deck. I didn't know about the problem and the solution slide and the business model and the canvas, and those are all things that I just didn't know about as like an engineer. And so the programming that they had to get started was really helpful. And then the mentors, I think, was one of the most valuable things, having people come back who had successfully started businesses in the past.
Yeah, awesome. So earlier today when you were having our lunch and learn, you had kind of talked about those unique sectors. And Lingco obviously is kind of an interesting tech sector to be in language. So what kind of sparked that inspiration of starting Lingco?
I was a really bad French student in high school. So I took 3 years of French. I was a C- French student. And after 3 years, I could barely speak another language, like at all. And it just seemed, odd that you could take like 3 years of a subject and not be able to, like hold a conversation or to do anything like that. And so I wanted to study abroad, and I knew that if I was going to study abroad, I had to be able to learn a language. And so that's kind of where the inspiration for Lingco came from.
Awesome, yeah. I guess for maybe some people that don't know, do you want to dive deeper into what Lingco is?
Yeah, so I'm curious, is anyone here taking French or Spanish at Michigan State? Anyone? Really? So we are an online language learning platform for schools. So we are the online course content. So if you guys use like math, like with WebWorks or MyLab or any of those like online like components that you guys have to buy along with the books, that's what we are for language learning.
Awesome, yeah. So obviously you've become pretty successful now that you're out of MSU, went full in on Lingco. Do you want to talk about a little bit about that journey, jumping right into being an entrepreneur after graduation?
Yeah, it was It was really challenging because with starting a business and entrepreneurship, you are constantly having to learn new things every day. And it's one of those things like where you get the test first and then the lesson later. And so it would be constantly, we have this thing due tomorrow and we have to figure out what do we do here. And so you're always in like that problem solving mode. And so having those skills from, college to like have to figure out things, oh, this is due tonight and how do I figure this out? And can I get somebody to help me? Do they know it? Can we go to the office hours? Can we go here and there? I think those are like really important skills that were very transferable into entrepreneurship.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. So when did you realize that Lingco was growing and how did you handle that growth?
I think in the senior year, so I ended up doing 5 years, as a lot of engineers do. And so in the 4th year, I remember it being like the first day of school and I still had like classes, right? So like I'm still, doing classes, trying to finish up my degree. And on the first day, as they're going through the syllabus, I'm like out in the hallway trying to figure out a problem because like the system's melting down and there's like 10,000 real users using the app who are also on their first day of school. And nothing was working and I had no idea how to fix it. And like I'm supposed to be like in class right now and I'm out in the hallway like on my laptop trying to figure out how this is working or like how to fix it. Everyone's on the chat support with me and I'm like, oh, our team's taking a look. There is no team, it's just me. And and I don't know what to do. I mean, that was scary, but that's when I feel like I really realized that it was real because there's like 10,000 users on the other side of the screen who think this is actually like a real thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, right. That's funny. What are some of those practical lessons and takeaways that you learned in college that have helped you now? You touched a little bit on it, but do you want to expand on that a little more?
Yeah, I think, in college, often you're going to get a project that's going to have, a due date, it's going to have exact requirements, it's going to have a rubric, it's going to have like all these things where if I do every single one of these things, I'll get an A and, it will work. But in the real world, so often like you're the one who has to decide, these are the requirements, this is what's going to work or not going to work. And so to be able to like really effectively manage deadlines when there's more work to be done than, time, to have to figure out like what's actually going to work. And I think one thing that I was able to do really well in college is really find people who could help me learn how to do something. And so whether that was in like my, classes where I was always making friends with people in class. Like if I could see like there was the smart kid who had it figured out with the project or something like that, we were best friends. It was like, can I bring you a coffee? Like, hey, you're gonna be at the library, can I come to the library? Like, I think those are really important skills. You don't have to be the smartest person in the room, you just gotta find the smartest person in the room and be friends with them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. Paul had asked you this question earlier, but if you could go back in time and give, younger Seth, probably sitting in these seats, a piece of advice that you think has helped you along the way, what would that be? Or what can these students be doing now to prepare for that post-graduation entrepreneurship life?
So specifically in entrepreneurship, there's this idea of like product market fit. And if you have product market fit, then you want to go all in on it, where it's like, oh, we should really invest in this. People are excited about it. It's working great. But so often people will think that they have product market fit before they do, and then they'll go all in. And I can think of at least like 3 moments in Lingco's history where I thought that we had it figured out and we should go all in. And I put a lot of chips in on the table only to find out that, oh, actually we were maybe a little off, or we were a little earlier. That's not exactly it. And so I think it's important to have confidence and conviction and to place, bets and put the chips in. But on the other hand, you want to think about, well, what if it isn't right? Or you want to have, I guess, a backup plan. And so I think if I could tell, younger Seth, I would say, certainly go forward with all that, conviction, go for it, put in all the chips, but give a little bit of extra thought to be like, are we sure that this is the right answer? Like, is this actually it? and just, think about that plan B, what if not?
Yeah, for sure. What do you see as your next steps as an entrepreneur? What do you see next for Lingco? If you want to backpedal a little bit and like dive deeper into that process of, growing Lingco to what it is today and what you want to continue to do there.
Yeah, so with Lingco, the whole idea was that we wanted to be able to predict what parts of a language students know. We wanted to be able to make recommendations to the teachers to say, this student knows, these things, this other student, knows these, but like doesn't know this yet. And we wanted to be able to recommend content that was going to work really well. And I think that that's really important in language learning, and I think it's important in learning in general that the system or the homework that you're doing can actually know if you know the topic or not, and then give you, different, maybe you need remediation or you need some extra instruction or some tips or some more practice. Like different people need different things. But I think that that actually is beyond just language learning. Kids need that in math, they need that in chemistry, they need it in, science. And if we could build Lingco in a way that we could take some of these technologies or lessons learned and spread them to other disciplines, I think that there's a lot of potential there. The other thing is certainly English as a second language. If we can take those technologies or those things that we've learned for teaching, English speakers French or English speakers Spanish, then certainly we could teach Spanish speakers English and things like that.
Yeah, that's awesome. Kind of going into that as well, we had talked earlier about there's so many other language learning platforms like Duolingo that students had brought up and how you kind of combated that competition in that field. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, in every sector, there's always going to be like the super popular like direct-to-consumer app. And so like the example I gave was, everybody uses like Kayak for booking trips and things like that. But those are going to be directed at consumers. So like Duolingo is like very specific for the consumer market. But often with any popular consumer app, there's like a less sexy business app. So like if there's Kayak for personal, booking, there's going to be like Navan, or there's going to be other like business-specific apps. And so with Lingco, we were kind of like the school version of Duolingo, because people, Duolingo doesn't care about grades, assignments, due dates, classes, integrations, all those things, whereas teachers and schools and things like that really do. And so for any app idea that you guys have, like if it's, I want to make a video editor, well, you can make a video editor where people can download the app and they can make their videos, and that's great. But there might be a super niche corporate version of that. Like we want to edit training videos for, compliance, or we want to be able to, do things like that. So Duolingo is really the direct to consumer, like there's no teacher involved version of it, but that only makes up half of the people in the world learning a language. The other half of the people learning a language are learning it in a classroom, and that's the market that we're targeting.
Yeah, do you want to dive deeper into that market that you're targeting and how, you talked about it earlier as well, I thought it was very interesting how Lingco is different in the way of how it teaches you to learn a language, in the sense of like going back and forth. Do you remember what I'm talking about, how you were saying? Yeah, do you want to touch a little bit on that? I thought it was an interesting aspect of our conversation.
Yeah, one of the topics, or one of the questions at luncheon today was like why language learner? Like, how did you pick this? And I think for most entrepreneurs, when they're choosing a topic, it's because they see something that is like so obviously wrong, and they're like, the answer's right here. Like, we just have to do it. You just have to have like total conviction. For me, for language learning, the thing that just didn't make sense is language learning is like one of the easiest things ever. It's actually natural. Our brains are hardwired to learn language. If I drop you off in, the middle of a country and pick you up in a year, you're going to be speaking that language. Whether somebody teaches it to you or not, it's just our brain is wired for it. But we've figured out a way in the school system to make it like as difficult as possible, because we chop it up and we say, rather than just saying, I want you to learn French, so I'm going to speak to you in French for an hour a day, we're going to break it up every single rule and every last exception, and we're going to make you learn all these grammar drills, and we're going to make you memorize all this vocabulary. Like, we made it something that was super easy to do and natural, and we actually like made it really difficult. And that just didn't make sense to me as a student. It's like, why does this have to be so hard? And so with Lingco, what we're trying to do is we're trying to bring it back to that more natural approach where they're watching videos with people speaking French. They're listening to people speaking Spanish. Like, they're learning it in a more immersive way, like they would if you were to drop somebody off in the middle of Guatemala. You'd come back and they would be speaking Spanish.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I just found that was a very fascinating way to look at it. So obviously now you're based in New York. Do you want to talk a little bit about that journey, probably being in much more resources, and how those resources have helped you grow Lingco, and how resources in general will help anybody grow a business?
Yeah, I think that, first of all, I mean, Michigan State was an excellent resource as far as building a business. When you compare to other colleges and universities and what they have available, most don't have an entrepreneurship lab, most don't have a Burgess Institute, most don't have a rich alumni network in terms of people who are available, and mentors and connections and competitions and all those things. And so I was really lucky that when I was at Michigan State, there were so many people who I had talked to and met, and connections that were made. And so I just got really good at networking. And so when I got to New York, like, it made a lot of sense that I could look up other entrepreneurs, other investors, Michigan State alumni, and everybody's like a second or third connection once you have a big enough of a network.
Mm-hmm. And has that network now led you to be hiring people into your own business? And would you say?
Yeah, when we started hiring people, the first people that we hired were just like randos off of LinkedIn. And that ended up being like a huge disaster for us. And so we had to strip down the entire team. So we went from, like the core 3 or 4 people all the way up to 8, but then that was a disaster and it melted back down to 4. And we realized that if we wanted to build like a really good team, we needed really good people. And the best way to hire somebody who was really good was from their reputation or their network. And especially since we were in such a small industry with language learning being like really niche, we were able to figure out like who has the best reputation for being a sales rep, who has the best reputation for being a content editor, who has the best reputation for engineering or customer support. And I was able to go poach basically that first person who I really needed. And then she brought her best person who she had worked with in a previous role. And then that person brought their best person. And so now we're up to 16 employees. And out of those 16, 13 of them were from within the network of somebody else at that company and had already worked with them. And they had a reputation that was well proven. And none of those people who we've hired that from within the network have left. They're all really solid, and they're exactly what we expected. And so it just goes to show that your network and your reputation can be really important, especially when you're hiring people and looking for people to work with.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. Outside of Burgess, what else were you involved in at your time here at MSU?
Let's see. So I did at a year on the water skiing team. That was
That's fun.
Yes. I, of course, was involved a lot in the, in addition to entrepreneurship,
Yes.
I was also in the Spartan Aviators, which was Michigan State's pilot club, which had 3 people in it. So not exactly a club. We would take turns being like the president, the secretary, and like the vice president.
Gotta do what you gotta do.
Exactly, you gotta do what you gotta do. And so I also had a great career at Chipotle for 2 years, which I was super proud of, and probably one of my most favorite jobs, second to being CEO at Lingco, that I've really enjoyed.
Yeah, that's awesome. Do you want to dive deeper a little bit into your some challenges maybe that stick out in your entrepreneurial journey and how you've learned from them?
Yeah, I think being an entrepreneur is it's being creative. And one of the things that I think really is a challenge with building a business is that when I was, just starting Lingco, and we had, like $3,000 in our bank account, and we had like $7,000 in credit card debt, and all of those things, like those were crazy times. And yet here we are now with the same problems and the same, wins and, things, just with more zeros behind them. And so no matter how successful you get and no matter how many like challenges you solve, you just get the next one, which ends up being bigger, and it feels the exact same. So it's kind of funny looking back at, like when we were just, like a really small group and still trying to figure it out, and like the stress and the emotions and like the triumphs and the failures and like all those things that we felt. I mean, I look back now and I'm like, what? That was like $3,000. Like we've spent more than $3,000 since we've been talking, like in terms of, payroll and stuff like that. Yet that like was huge.
Yeah.
And so I think that learning how to manage challenges is like really important, because they don't go away. I used to think like, all right, well, once we get past, this thing, then it will be smooth sailing. It's never been smooth sailing. And I've just learned to stop like expecting that. And I know that I've been fortunate to have, mentors and people who I've worked with who have, been through that. And when I would always wonder like, why aren't you so stressed out about this? Or like, you don't seem like the world's on fire either. No, it's just they've been through it before. They know how it works. And so I think being able to manage that is super important.
Yeah, for sure. So as an engineering student as well, do you want to go back into kind of how you decided to pursue entrepreneurship, or how you came about it here at MSU?
Yeah, so with engineering, it's interesting because you're able to, build things, right? Like you're able to know how an app is made. You're able to know like every single line of code and like how it works. And so when I saw that, with the, the content that was being delivered and like some of the apps that we were using for like the learning sites, like I'm sure you guys, if you guys still use D2L or some of these like WebWorks, like these are some of the most like antiquated apps like out there in the universe, and we were paying like $75 a semester for it. It just, like that wouldn't work in any other context. And so every day I had to use these dumb apps, and I was like, this is ridiculous, like I could do something better. But like I literally could, because I could code. And so I didn't know anything about teaching languages. I was just a bad French student. That was the only thing that qualified me. And so what I did is I was able to find somebody, a professor in MSU's French department, who really did care about building, a better solution. And he knew what the solution needed to look like. He just couldn't code. I could code, I just didn't know what the solution needed to look like. So the two of us together were really able to sketch out that first version.
That's awesome. What are some of those practical lessons inside and outside of the classroom that you feel have set you apart as an entrepreneur?
Yeah, I think that, well, the first experience that I had was, with Lingco, was getting an internship at TechSmith, and it was a case where they had, 50 applicants, and they all looked the same. We had all taken the same classes, we were all in our junior year, and there was nothing that was distinctive. And so when I was once I got into the interview and was able to talk about how I was like building Lingco on the side, and how I had already seen like some of their products that they use, how I liked Snagit and Camtasia, and had ideas of like what wanted to be changed, like they were really shocked, and like I was able to get that internship. And I saw that as a CEO, them like hiring interns, hiring employees and things like that. Everybody looks the same coming out of college. And so what you could actually do to differentiate was really important. And something that I thought was really interesting too is there are a lot of 4.0 students that you would then go to interview, and like they often didn't do very well in interviews. It was like the 3.0 student who had a job on the side, or had done a different project, or had like learned how to do real things that often, and they were often much more successful, whereas in many cases, and this is no disrespect to the 4.0 students, you guys are awesome, but so often it's just like, how do I do exactly what the project tells me to? Like, I don't want to do anything different. I don't want to rock the boat. Whereas other students were like, all right, like I'm a 3.5 student, I'm okay with that, but like I did this, I'm a 3.5 student because I'm doing this thing on the side, or I have, this other experience. And so thinking about college, not just as like I want to get the highest grade and like that's the most important thing, like that's not the end all be all. I mean, I'm really proud that as a CEO of Lingco who went to Michigan State University, I have, of our 16 employees, I have one who went to Harvard, I have one who went to Yale, I have one who went to Dartmouth. Like these are all people who were the valedictorians of their classes. They were all like highly regarded and they're really great people, but in the end, like it doesn't really matter, if you went to Harvard or Yale or if you got a 4.0 or a 2.0. It's about like what you've actually done with that degree and what you've actually accomplished and what you can actually speak to. And I think that's so important to have other projects, other passions, other hobbies, like not just here's my resume and I did the same 12 things that the other 10,000 students in my class did.
Yes, as a non-4.0 student, I appreciate that.
Absolutely.
Kind of taking that a step further, what tips do you have for young entrepreneurs that are post-grad that want to grow their network, want to find resources, find that community, maybe in their unique, entrepreneurship sector?
Yeah, I mean, I've been surprised at just how many great resources there are. I mean, certainly, within Michigan State, but even like within the East Lansing area, there's a great organization called Startup Grind that I've been a part of and really excited to contribute to. There are others like, within Michigan, there are startup accelerators called like Techstars and Y Combinator. Like there are so many people starting businesses now. Like I'm actually shocked. Like it used to be kind of like a niche thing, like this whole entrepreneurship thing. But now like everybody and their brother has a business. And so there are other people that you can certainly reach out to. I think LinkedIn is a really good thing to get good at, especially with such a broad alumni network. And I've had recent grads reach out to me who are now in New York. There are people that I've reached out to, especially when I was a student. I would have used so much LinkedIn, like, hey, I'm a recent grad and I noticed that like you're in the sector, like I have a couple of questions about this, and people are generally super happy to help. And so I think not enough people take advantage of that.
Yeah, for sure. So you kind of touched on what's next for Lingco. What do you see as like your 5-year, 10-year kind of plan, and like how do you foresee yourself getting there?
It's a great question.
I know, a loaded question.
Yeah, I mean, that's so hard because I think, especially when you start a business, you just expect, like I remember the projections, it was like, oh, it's just gonna be up and to the right, there's gonna be this great like hockey stick looking graph, the first year we'll do, 1 million, then the second year we'll do like 10 million, and like the third year we'll do like 100 million, then like we'll be done, it'll be perfect. But unfortunately, reality like doesn't work like that.
Right.
And so, you have your plan, but then like what actually happens can be a little trickier.
Yes.
So I've stopped trying to like think exactly, I guess, plan of like, okay, this is gonna be my 5 years, this is gonna be my 10. Because every time I try to plan it, I look back and I'm like, I was so far off in terms of my predictions. But
that's a fair approach.
But that being said, I think that Lingco is on a great track now. We have 16 employees, which has been great, and we are finally, I think, finding that product market fit. But like I said earlier, let's hope that I'm actually accurate this time. And so now it's really just doubling down. It's growing the business and really focusing on growing, especially within K-12 and in the U.S.
Yeah. Do you kind of want to go into a little bit about your specific, because you're B2B, I believe. Yeah. Do you want to talk a little bit about that? I feel like it's kind of a unique process.
Yeah, this is like my thing. So everybody has like their own passions, or everybody has their own like view on like what are great apps and what are things that they should invest in, especially like when you're either a founder, you're like, I want to make an app for people who do this or that. I love business-to-business apps because they are the most boring apps, but they're the most underserved and underutilized. Like, if I wasn't making Lingco like a language learning app, I'd probably be making like a a navigation app for garbage trucks or something like that. Because there are so many apps out there that people use every day, like for scheduling the catering, like there's an app for that. For sending out like event invites, there's an app for that. And especially in the business world where things move a lot slower, it sucks because it takes like 3 years to get a deal, but when you're getting a deal, you're getting like a $3 million deal. And so I think that that's actually a much better sector than B2C, direct to consumer, where one day you're at the top of the world, the next day somebody on Reddit doesn't like you and like it's all blown up. And so the volatility of like the direct to consumers app where it's like what's hot now, what's not hot, and that I think like that's like easy come, easy go.
Right.
But B2B, that takes like forever to get into, but it takes forever to get out of.
Yeah.
And so long as you can play the long game, it's great, and you don't have to sell to 1,000 clients. It's like you could have 100 really good clients who are paying you $500,000 a year for some niche software, and there's only 3 other competitors in the industry, and 2 of them are super antiquated. Like, that's like a dream come true.
Right. Yeah.
So the boring stuff is the best stuff.
That's your advice. Boring stuff is better.
I'm serious. Like, the richest people that are around, like, they're in these weird industries that nobody's ever heard of. I mean, the most successful people, right? Like, you look at them and you're like, what do you mean you're in charge of making like the stands for the hand sanitizers? And like, you mean that Walmart is like, your biggest customer and you sell like $30 million? Like, that's the kind of stuff that when people think about entrepreneurship, those are also generally the most outdated industries that nobody's disrupted. Because there's only like 2 people, nobody's ever heard of them. And so to have like young, bright minds like coming in and be like, we're gonna mess up the industry, like that's like a really good opportunity to make a lot of money, to do very well, and to actually, fix a broken industry.
Do you have any advice on how to maybe get your foot in the door in B2B?
It takes so much. So like, you gotta have time, you gotta have commitment, because the thing that sucks too for B2B is they don't wanna buy from you if they've never heard of you. And so you gotta sell to somebody to get recommendations in order to sell, but like, it's a catch-22. And so you have to work your way in to find that advocate within the industry who will take a risk or who will take a chance on you and say, in our case, it was Michigan State, and it worked out because like they couldn't not talk to me. I was a student. I would show up, they'd be like, I gotta talk to you, it's my office hours, like I can't turn him away. And the first time I talked to him, he didn't want to talk to me. He was kind of like, oh, here's a young student with like their app idea, and it's gonna be like another Duolingo. But then I was back again and again and again, and finally he was just like, maybe if I talk to him, he'll go away. And he's like, oh, wait, this guy actually has some like ideas. So I think first of all, it's that persistence, because especially when you're like, I want to change the way that we do this. I want to, do it new and disrupt the market. Like, there's going to be a lot of skepticism at first, because they're going to be like, well, this is how it's always been for 10 years. This is how it's always been for 15 years. What is some 21-year-old going to do about it that's going to change?
Right.
But once you get that one advocate, I mean, it was starting at Michigan State, finding that one French professor, and then he introduced me to the French department at University of Chicago. The University of Chicago then introduced me to UT Austin and their French department. And then at University of Chicago, somebody had written a book and they needed an online platform for their book. And then that textbook publisher who had then published that book needed an online platform. And suddenly we went from 1,000 to 10,000 to 50,000 users, in just those 4 connections. And so in all those cases, I couldn't have gone to the University of Chicago and said, oh, I want to sell to you. But it was that recommendation from a trusted peer. So it goes back to like building your network.
Yeah, for sure.
Finding that advocate who can give you the in, and then kind of riding on their trust and their reputation.
Yeah, for sure. Awesome. Well, this has been a great conversation. I'm going to open it up here at the end for some Q&A. So Aaron and Caitlin will be on either end with the microphones. Do we have any questions to get us started?
Seth, when you were a student and founding this, when you look back at that, she asked you a couple of good questions about that. Was there anything you would look back and say, I wouldn't have launched this company at that time because of the pressure of being a student and a founder? What would you recommend to others that are thinking about, do I launch this now or do I wait? It was a tough time, I'm sure.
Being in college is the absolute best time to start a startup. This is the only time that you can take a huge risk, fall flat on your face, and like still, have an apartment and have, like food to eat. When you're in the real world, and you're like, I'm gonna quit my job to go do this venture and I'm not gonna have any income, like that's a very different set of circumstances. This is the time in your life where you already have an apartment, you already got your meal plan, you're basically set. And you have all these resources, you have these people who are willing to help, you have these events that you can go to. It is absolutely the best time to, start a startup.
Hi, Seth. Thanks for joining us today. I appreciate it. You mentioned that it's sometimes more beneficial to find an industry that has few competitors. But I was wondering, when starting up initially, are there any certain strategies that you'd implement to set your company ahead of, to stand up outside from other companies like Duolingo?
Yeah, I mean, the good thing is that in our case, right, like Duolingo wasn't actually a competitor because the schools weren't like using them like in lieu of, the textbook companies were actually like our like competitors. And that was great because they were old, they were antiquated. There was no like Green Owl to compete with. It was just, McGraw-Hill and, some of these like really old ones. So finding an old industry that is like deeply seated with few competitors, but like entrenched ones, I think is great because you know who the competitors are. Like exactly which 3 targets you have. You can learn everything about them. You can know what they do well, what they don't do well. And the bar's generally pretty low too, because the thing is, when there's only 3 competitors in in any given industry, right? It's going to be the lowest common denominator. And so as long as none of those 3 are better than each other, they can all stay really bad. So they don't have to release a new feature if the other 2 don't release a new feature. And they stay like that for like 10 years. And so then you have a new company who just comes in and is like, oh, we're gonna totally disrupt all of that. It takes a minute for it to catch on at first, but then it picks up and now like they're on the back foot. So you don't want a company, or you don't want an industry, at least in my view, where there are flashy competitors like Duolingo. Like imagine if we were trying to compete against Duolingo of saying, oh, well here, you should download their app, no, you should download our app, no, you should download that. That would be really hard. We don't have like, the TikTok following that the Owl has. They have really great, social media. They have like, this viral following and things like that. But McGraw-Hill doesn't. Vista Higher Learning doesn't. Like, and that's the perfect thing. Like the old and boring is the perfect thing to go, like disrupt.
For context, before I ask this question, so that people know, the 2 old guys in the room here, John and I, are early investors of Seth. So my question is, how did you decide, or how can you help them know if you're launching a company as a student? How do you know when to start talking to investors, or how do you know if you even need investment?
Well, I would love to have figured out a way to start Lingco without investment, but unfortunately, I have not cracked that nut.
He's like, I wish I didn't have these 2 guys.
I mean, but I think with investors, it's really hard because you have to have some sort of proof or traction that what you're onto is like something that people want, that there's actually a fit for it, like that there's a reason for them to take their hard-earned money and temporarily part with it. And so as far as like for investors, like you have to get to a point that there's enough proof that what you're going to build is actually going to work. And that's hard in the beginning when you're in the idea stage. And what's even harder is you often need investor money to build the product that people will buy to show that there's proof that people want to buy it. In starting a company, there's a lot of like catch-22s where you're like, well, or chicken before the egg kind of thing, where you're like, well, we need money to build the thing that people will buy so that we can prove that people will buy it, but people will never buy it if we don't get money to build it, but they won't give us money to build it because nobody's bought it. And so you got to just figure out a way to get somebody to take an early step in and to take a chance.
Any other questions? No? Alrighty. Well, thank you so much for coming back to campus. It was a great conversation. Thank you for sharing all of your thoughts and your journey with us. Feel free to help yourself to some food, and Seth will be up here for a few minutes if you'd like to ask personal, individual questions and connect with him. Thank you.